I want you to think about something for a second. Where did your values come from? Like, actually sit with it. The things that you want, the career, the hobby, the body, the lifestyle. Did you choose those, or did someone else choose those for you? And did you never question it? Because I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and the honest answer for most people, myself included at various points, is that the life that they're and we're living basically isn't our own. It's assembled from other people's expectations, social media, in whatever the school system actually ended up deciding for us. It's our worth that we haven't actually chosen for ourselves. And the terrifying part is that it feels completely normal from the inside. And borrowing other people's lives has always felt that way. And here's what social media does that nobody really says clearly. It doesn't show you other people's lives. It gives you their desires, what they want to be presented as. So when you scroll long enough, your brain quietly absorbs what success is supposed to look like. The physique, the apartment, the job title, the relationship. And because you're so used to seeing the top 1% of people constantly, the most attractive people, the wealthiest people, aesthetically, we are using that to judge our, most ideal version of human life. That's our baseline for normal, which is completely warped. And then we start wanting things not because we actually want them, but because we've been shown them enough times to actually feel like wanting them was our own ideas. And I'll give you an example. I got plastic surgery, and I want to be real about where that impulse came from. Some of it was genuinely human. Wanting to look good was, of course, not invented by social media. But that specific version of it, the standard I was measuring myself against, that thing that I felt like I was just falling short of, that came from something external, from faces and bodies that I'd seen so many times that they started to feel like the expectation that if I was not beautiful, then somehow I wasn't a person. And I'm not saying that it was the wrong decision. I stand by it, but I think it's worth being honest about where this desire came from, because a lot of the things that we think that we want have the same origin story, that they didn't come from inside of us, but from a world that is repeatedly showing us what we're supposed to be. And school does the same thing with just ambitions instead of how it looks. We spend 12 years, trained to show up on time, to follow these instructions, to produce output and get evaluated on it. And then you graduate and wonder why this corporate job feels completely, natural, even though you hate the idea of it. It's because we've been practicing it since we were like 6 years old. The school system didn't actually build our curiosity. It increased our compliance and built these specific desires inside of us, like, a stable career, respected title, a clear path, and these measures of success. And I'll say these aren't like bad things necessarily, but they're also not our own. And, they were handed to us. And there's a difference between choosing something willingly that you actually want and choosing it because we were trained to. And society has trained us to choose almost all of our current decisions. So I'd like to bring up a philosopher, Kierkegaard. And so he had this framework for how people move through life. And he named it as 3 stages. The aesthetic, which is chasing what looks good and feels good and seems impressive. And then the ethical, which is following the rules and doing what society says is right. And then there's this authentic stage, which is actually reckoning with who you are, underneath all of this external factors. And his point is that people never really get to this third stage because the first 2 are far more comfortable. And that third one requires you to sit with some questions that are genuinely very difficult to answer. And so if nobody was watching, ask yourself this: would you still want what you want? If your parents couldn't see your choices, would you make the same ones? If social media didn't exist, what would success look like to you? And most people don't ask those questions. And so they live in this stage to stage of their whole life and call it a career and their personality. And they really never figured out why something feels off. It's just this step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, and continues until you die. Bullshit. And for me, I train MMA, and this is probably one of the best examples I have of a value that's actually mine. The odds of it paying me financially in a very meaningful way are basically zero. There's no career path that makes sense in a traditional way, and nobody sat me down and told me that I should do it. So yeah, it doesn't really look impressive on some resume and doesn't fit the aesthetic of a school student or a college student, or what I'm supposed to be doing. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. Like I thought a lot about, whether to stop or whether I should just, redirect that energy into something that's considered practical or productive. And the answer every time has been a very, very easy no. And that's not because I'm delusional about, oh, it's gonna make me rich. Like I'm gonna have so much opportunity in a very safe way from this. No, it's because it's one of the few things in my life that I can say with complete honesty came from inside of me. I didn't see it on some freaking syllabus or someone else's Instagram in a way that made me desire it. I just felt like I really resonated with this sport since a child. And that's why it's real. That's why it's enjoyable. And I do it because it's mine. And that feeling of doing something that's genuinely your own, it's so different from everything else, because once you have it, you can't really justify for settling for any other version of your life. And if I want to fight, I'll fight. If I want to make videos, I'll make videos. And the point is that these decisions come from me and not from what some algorithm or some teacher decided what was best for me. So this begs the question, how do we actually figure out what parts of our lives are actually our own? And it's difficult. I don't really have a clean answer, but I think it really starts from asking where this desire came from. Not just accepting that you want something, but actually tracing it back and asking, did you want this before you saw someone else have it? Would you still want it if nobody else could see you doing it? Is there any version of this exists that when you strip away the validation and status it provides, that you would still do it? Ask yourself that. And the weird things, the things that don't make obvious sense, the things that people question, the things that have no aesthetic or monetary payoff, those are usually the ones that are worth paying attention to, because nobody performs those for other people. They only happen because something inside of you says, hey, I want this. And for me, that's not always MMA. And for you, it probably is something different, but it's worth finding, because the alternative is spending your entire life being very good at someone else's thing and wondering why it never feels like enough, why you never feel like yourself. And the life that's been designed for you by school, by social media, by your parents, expectations, by whatever, the standard of the top 1% is what decided it. And that's bullshit, because no one else should aspire to what you want. That life is very available. It's easy to find, and people will encourage you towards it constantly. And that's why the one that's actually your own is the much harder but much better decision, because it requires you to question the things that most people have never questioned in their entire lives. And for a while, it'll probably be uncomfortable and uncertain and hard to explain to people, but at least it's your own. So figure out what you actually want, not what someone else wants, not what was handed to you, what you want, and start there. Tell me what you want. Leave a comment below. His point was that people never